Hello, this is Noah Gutierrez with Diversified Product, and today we are going to be doing a webinar over the LineWise XHD pole puller. And right off the bat here, we want to go into a video that we have showing the pole puller, the XHD pole puller, and basically some video showing how it is used. And so there's some stills in here and then some video showing the pole puller actually pulling the pole out of the ground. So we want to go ahead and show what that looks like. You should see that there on the screen. You can see the towards the bottom there, you can see how much pole is coming out of the ground at this point in the video. What's pretty neat about the pole puller here is you can just simply retract the cylinders after it's completely extended the cylinders, and then you can just reset the heads. You leave the chains in place, just kind of make sure you get the slack out of the chains by rotating the heads inward, and then reactivate the cylinders to extend, and it'll continue to pull the pole out of the ground. If you can see right here, you see it has a good wide footprint around the pole, which makes it for good stabilization compared to the single cylinder pole pullers, which we'll look at today in another video. But I wanted to share real quick what it is that we're talking about today. And quite obviously, it's the XHD pole puller with the orange heads and the black cylinders that you see in the video. And so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into the pole puller, XHD pole puller presentation. So keep in mind that today I'm just showing the XHD 60. Later on the website, when we go back to that at the end of this presentation, we're going to see some information on the smaller pole puller, which is the HD 30. There are more XHD 60 pole pullers in the industry today from LineWise. The main reason I would believe that is true is because, number one, we've sold more of the XHD 60. But the reason why it's mostly chosen, I believe, is because the larger one, the XHD 60, will do everything that the smaller one will do. And so a lot of times people have demoed the smaller one, and then ultimately in the end, they chose the larger one, which is the XHD 60, just for a little bit more money, they could pull every single pole that they could possibly need to pull. Now, there's another version of the pole puller that we will not have information on here today, but it looks just like the XHD 60, and it's a little bit wider. Dave can chime in and tell me what that width is, but I want to say it's a 36-inch wide inside base.
It is. It's 36-inch wide.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. And there's only probably less than a handful out there, maybe like 10 units. And it was because out in California, Southern California, there was some poles with a wider butt on the poles. And so they wanted to have a wider base on the pole pullers. So those are the three options of the pole pullers that are available. Although again, that we're talking about the XHD 60, there is an HD 30, which is more of a distribution size pole puller. Very much like the XHD 60, just is smaller and lighter. Works the same with two cylinders and the rotating heads. And then you have the modified version of the XHD 60 with the wider base. Oh boy. Here we go. Okay. I got a screen here on the side. Here we go. Here you can see this particular XHD is positioned around the pole here. You can see it's been set with the chains going from head to head. Unlike the single cylinder pole pullers, we do not use the chain itself to pull the pole. We use the chains to tie the heads together. It is actually the heads and the pulling force, or the pushing force, I should say, of the cylinders that are causing the pole to come out of the ground, and not the chains. And so you would position the pole puller as you see here. This one has a little bit more slack in it than we would like for demonstration purposes, but we would take out about as much slack as we can, rotate the heads in manually to get more slack out of the chains, and then you can activate the cylinders to pull the pole out of the ground. The high capacity pulling poles up to 27 inch in diameter. The XHD pole puller can handle a class H6 95-foot pole. And so we talked about the heads rotating in. We call them cam action heads. But essentially what happens, I'm gonna go back to the previous slide here. As this cylinder extends on each side, it's going to want to cause the heads to rotate in. As that happens, the chain gets tighter, which causes the heads to bite harder into the pole and not allowing the pole puller to lose grip on the pole as it's pulling it out of the ground. There are some teeth that are in the pole puller head here. You can kind of see them sticking out more in this picture here, and a little bit right here. These teeth will bite into the pole as the heads are rolling over. The cylinders must be locked with the pin during transport. And so you can put this on the deck of a crane, you can put it on a trailer. I've carried both sizes in the back of my pickup. But you got some cylinder pins here at the bottom that you put in place to keep these cylinders from rocking back and forth. Imagine if you didn't have these pins in place and you're going down the road and you hit a bump, or even down the right of way, these cylinders are going to want to swing back and forth. So this is why you put this pin in for transport purposes. Now this position right here is more of when it's being positioned around the pole. In transport mode, we'll see a picture of that later. This pin would be in this hole over here, or the inside hole. And this is here just showing you the warning to remove transport pins before operation. I've been around the pole puller quite a bit, and I was on a demo about 2 weeks ago, and standing there right before we started pulling the pole, I made it look like I knew that I had to remove the pin, but the pin was still in place. And so that pin does have to be removed before you start trying to pull the pole. And that's what this decal here is trying to explain. This is more of your transport mode here. Now the cylinders are rotated in towards each other. And what you want to do here is, as I mentioned yesterday in the webinar we did, is that we could sell an outrigger pad that goes in the center of this to keep these heads from beating up against each other, or you could put a piece of plywood or something of the same material in between, so that as you're driving down the road, these heads don't beat back and forth against each other. Another thing that you could do is you could rotate the heads back and then strap them back away from each other. But whatever you can do to keep them from beating up against each other, that's going to help protect the heads of this pole puller. One thing I just noticed right here, this black canister right here is the manual container. And so if you order one of these pole pullers, you'll be able to find the manual for the pole puller inside that container there, strapped to the base of the pole puller. Here's an example that this was actually an HD in this picture here. We said it's XHD here, but it really was an HD pole puller in this picture. And this is on the deck of a line truck, digger derrick, as some people call it. And you can transport them on the deck of the digger derrick and then use the load line to offload it and put it next to the pole. Here you can see the lineman is positioning the pole puller so that the pole will end up between these fork pockets here on the bottom. Again, just because it has fork pockets doesn't mean it can't be lifted by the load line on the crane or digger derrick as we're doing here. But you can also use a skid steer. That's why we have the fork pockets at the bottom. There's 25 foot of hose, I believe it is, on the pole pullers. So that you can use this extra length in addition to any length that's on the reel on the hoses on your digger derrick or your skid steer to be able to attach to that tool circuit. Here you can see now the pole puller is now positioned in place with the pole in the center of the fork pockets on the bottom. Notice the chains have not been attached to the head on the opposite side as of yet. The chains are just hanging there. And here you can see, we wanted to point out, you can see it here too, the base of the pole puller is much wider, as mentioned earlier when the video was showing. You have a lot wider base to set on the ground. It's not just a single point of contact like a single cylinder. The single cylinder is going to have a lot smaller footprint, and it's going to want to dig into the ground, as we'll see in the video here a little bit later. But with the wide base of the pole puller on all three models that I mentioned at the beginning of this PowerPoint, they are going to have a much better chance of pulling the pole out because it has much more ground force that it has to push against. So that's what this is showing here, more clarity that it is a wider base. Some people have asked about, what if you're on an incline? It still works the same. Dave Packabush and I were out on a demo probably some months ago, maybe over a year ago at this point. And I remember we were on somewhat of an incline, and what they did was put some cribbing underneath one side of the pole puller, and it worked just fine. Here you can see now the chains have been tied off to the heads on each side. Again, the chains are not used to pull the pole itself. It's just to keep the heads tied together. Notice that this chain here versus the one that we saw in previous slides does not have as much slack in it. And what they're doing right now is pulling back on the head and rotating it over to get that slack out. Then as the cylinders rotate, as previously mentioned, the heads will rotate, causing the chains to bite, chains to tighten and cause the heads to bite harder. Notice there's no pins in the hose down below as previously stated. Here, there's just reiterating that the heads are rotating in. Notice that there's no slack whatsoever in the chains now, that the cylinders have started to extend and the heads began to roll. The slack was removed from the chain. Here again, the cylinders continue to extend. Notice that one of the cylinder rods is out further than the other. Some people, when using it, have asked, well, is that a problem, or why don't they extend the same? Well, the reason is because there's no equalizing valve, or whatever the correct term is, to keep them coming out the same. And really, quite honestly, there's no need for it. Once the chain tightens up and these heads are biting into this pole, it doesn't matter how much this cylinder is out versus this one. Now, the grip of the heads on the pole is what makes the difference. As this head goes up, it's going to pull this one along with it. So there's really no need to do that. On a couple of occasions where customers are just adamant about the cylinders being the same, we did some special stuff there, but why pay the extra money when it's still going to work the same? Here you can see the cylinders fully retracted at this point. And notice how this, again, the one on the cylinder on the right is out further than the left, but it still pulled the pole out of the ground. At this point, you can see the pole is completely removed. One of the things I didn't get to in the video today that was there was that it shows that the pole comes straight out of the ground. There is there's no moving the pole back and forth, making the hole in the ground bigger than what it needs to be. At one particular utility I was at, they were saying they really like that feature because it allows them to reuse the hole that the old pole came out of. Sometimes they're pulling the poles just to put a taller pole in there. And so, or maybe something else is wrong at the top of the pole, but they want to try to reuse that same hole rather than to dig another hole. So anyhow, that's That's showing it completely removed. The cylinder's retracted now and rolled back so that they can pull the pole out of the ground. Oh, where's that picture right here? It shows a clean hole here where the pole came out. This is a screenshot off of that video that we started off with today. Now here we have a video that we want to share. This is an example of a single cylinder pole puller working. Now, this was somewhat of a modified version. I didn't mention this yesterday, but in general, it still works the same way. The difference here is this particular company, a guy that worked there, came up with this extra base on here to have more ground to push against rather than just your basic foot plate for your single cylinder pole pullers. And in this one here still has the same problems that your single cylinder is going to have. And so you can see here that in this version of all other pole pullers, they used a chain to try to pull the pole out of the ground using the cylinder. Notice that what happened is that what it did is it pushed away from the pole. And there's about 12 minutes roughly of this going on. And Dave Packabush yesterday mentioned, notice all the guys around the pole that is taking to work this one single cylinder pole puller. And what Dave had mentioned yesterday was that with using our pole puller, the most you're going to need is 2 people at the ground level, or one person working the digger derrick perhaps, or one working the skid steer while the other one is working with the pole puller by LineWise. You don't have to have 2 people on the ground working it. Once you get it positioned around the pole, now it's just a matter of bringing the chains over towards each other on the heads and tying off the heads, and then now operating the cylinders to extend and retract the pole out of the ground. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people want to go with the single cylinder pole puller. Number one, price is one of the number one factors. For less than $1,000, is my understanding. I don't sell those single cylinder pole pullers, but it's my understanding that they cost less than $1,000. And ours is going to be, 17, 18 times that amount on the XHD. And that's one of the biggest differences. But look at everything that you're going to go through with the single cylinder versus the LineWise XHD pole puller. And we'll cover that a little bit more later. But in this case, look at how this single cylinder is now pushing into the ground. Dave Packabush brought to our attention yesterday, and what it's doing is compacting the ground around it even more, making it harder to pull the pole out. So it's working against itself. Dave, anything else that you want to mention about this single cylinder pole puller?
The weight of having to move this thing around. So the single cylinder is probably over 70. I know it's over 70 pounds.
Yes,
so you're trying to move this thing around and get it up to the pole and get it all positioned and all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for hurt backs or on the job injuries, this is one of the ways to do it, is with these single cylinder pullers. That's
right. I failed to mention that today. Very true what Dave is saying there. And I've heard that story many times. When they come to buy our pole puller, when a customer comes to us and talks to us about the pole puller, they talk about the experiences that they've had using the single cylinders, and how they had all these different injuries from having to carry them around, like Dave was saying, the injured backs and shoulders and all kinds of other problems. In the next video, we're going to see a way that they've used a digger derrick to pull poles out of the ground, and how it's caused damages to the digger derrick, which in one instance, a customer called me and said that he bought 2 XHD pole pullers, and he said that, had he just bought the XHD pole puller sooner, he could have saved more than what he spent on the 2 XHD pole pullers, because that's what it had costed him in damages to his digger derrick. But I won't go through this whole video here, but you can see that there's a lot of work that they got to go through, and including moving it from one side to the other to try to get it to work. Now you notice the poles start going off to the side. It's just so many different reasons why this is a bad idea. Yet people do it all the time because it's the cheapest method. And And I've been hearing this term a lot lately called work smarter, not harder. There's better equipment out there to be used in these here. Shouldn't just be cost driven. You're going to pay for what you get. And if what you're paying for on these smaller ones is saving you money, but getting you injuries to your linemen, that is a bad decision. That decision should never be made that way. To save money over that of a person's body and injuries and things of that nature. On this next slide, you can see another video that shows where a digger derrick is being used to remove a pole. I was sharing a story yesterday that I was out on an in-service for it was a basket. I remember this after the demo yesterday, that I was putting a rotating basket by Diversified or LiftWise into service, and that same customer had bought a digger derrick. And the digger derrick manufacturer representative was there doing the in-service. And I remember hearing him say, the digger derrick is not designed to pull poles out of the ground. He specifically said, he's seen people grab a hold of it like you see here, and they extend the boom forward, and then they bring it back, they go left, they go right to try to get it out of the ground, widen up the hole on the ground to break it loose. Does it work? Sure, it does. They do it all the time. The problem is they're not realizing what kind of damages they're doing or placing into the digger derrick. The rotation gear at the base is not designed for this kind of activity, and it causes these damages. And the cylinders were not designed for this kind of work as well. It is designed to simply guide the pole into the ground and to raise the digger derrick, the poles in and out of the ground, but not to pull them from a pole that has been, for lack of a better description at this point, pressurized in the ground. Breaking that pressure with the digger derrick is not what it's designed to do. Furthermore, some of these digger derricks have man basket options that they use on them. Imagine they're doing all this damage to this digger derrick, and then they go and use the man basket option on this digger. What happens if they go up into the air and then this thing just all of a sudden breaks off on them, and then they end up injuring someone? Once again, another reason why you should use the proper equipment to pull poles and not risk the lives of the linemen and the people out there working on the crews. But that's what is going on here. And you can see eventually he gets it out of the ground, but not knowing what kind of damages have been caused here. And this here is just the video we saw earlier. Now, I want to go back to the website here right quick and just kind of show you what we have there. We're about to be done here. I always try to keep these webinars to about 30 minutes. While we're getting to the website here, one of the things that I wanted to mention is I know that someone has mentioned, that for demos, they expect that, we're actually out in the field or things of that nature, when we're trying to do as much as we can of getting out from just using the computer. Our goal is for the next LineWise live demo is we're going to go out to the shop floor and show you a product that we have out there. So it's an actual product we have on the floor, and we're going to try and do more of that when possible. Sometimes the product's just too big and we don't have the opportunity to do it here. So again, on our website, you can go to line-wise.com, and that's going to get you to the LineWise website. From there, you can go to utility transmission and then scroll down, and you'll find the XHD pole puller or pole puller down at the bottom right-hand corner for now. From there, you can download the brochure. You can share the LineWise link up here with people that you want to share this product with. You can also download the brochure. And then from there, you can see the pole puller that we've been talking about in today's webinar. Again, you can see the hoses here wrapped around the back of the pole puller. You have the fork pocket so that you can use a skid steer to transport it around from pole to pole if you like, if you're pulling a lot of poles at one time. But with the wide base, you can also use the heads here to lift up the pole puller using the load line on your crane or digger derrick and transport it on the deck of your crane if you like, or again on a trailer or the back of a pickup. The specifications down here below, we don't show the one for the extra wide base, but I assure you it exists. It's one of those secret item menus, right? You ever go to a restaurant and get ask for the secret item on the menu? Well, that's what the XHD 60 is with the wider base. It's just an item that we don't really put out there, but you can ask for it if needed. The 30, which is a smaller one we talked about, you can see all the criteria for it here, dimensional information, cylinder sizes, the size of the pole that you can pull, and then the XHD and all the same information here. Here in this picture, you can see what we call a stub puller. That is something else that we have available. That's for the poles that are cut off near the ground and you want to pull them out of the ground. Now, I'm going to get out of this one here and look closer towards the bottom here. So what happens with the stub puller, if it's too close to the ground, what you do is you remove the heads, the cam action heads that we talked about earlier, you remove those from the top of the cylinders. Then you install this stub puller device that bridges the two cylinders together. Now, what's going to happen is you would take the chains from the stub puller and choke them around the pole itself, way down at the ground. When you start off, of course, you may have to dig out some of the ground around the pole to get enough chain around it to choke it. But at that point, once you get there, then what you're able to do is activate the cylinders. And then what this is going to do is pull the stub out of the ground. And so here is a video that we have of that as well. You can see it pulling the stub out of the ground there. So anyhow, that is pretty much everything that we have on the pole puller. Oh, one more thing here. I didn't realize we had these pictures here yesterday. There is a skid steer here. You can see that application where it's being used with the skid steer to pick up on the forks on the bottom of the pole puller here. As a point of interest, Dave Peckerbush was in the skid steer on this particular application. This is me over here hiding behind the picture. I like to tell the story behind the pictures. Over here's just some more pictures that we had from before. So anyhow, that's the XHD pole puller by LineWise. Again, we have the XHD or the HD30. There are, and like I said, we have the wider base as well. Some people will ask, what about a single cylinder pole puller, but using the chain, but making it in a way that people won't use it, make it heavy so people won't try to pick it up. Another reason why we want to try to we're looking for ways to eliminate injuries. It isn't something that we've done just yet. We not necessarily, I'm not going to say that because we haven't had enough requests for it, but there may be a need for that someday. But as with the XHD and any other product by LineWise, the products have always come to the product line because customers requested it. Electric utility crews, electric utility contractor crews have come to us and said, hey, Noah, LineWise, Dave, this is what we need to get our jobs done. And so we go to engineering, we get it worked out, and that's how the product makes it to where it's at today. So just like with everything else, we encourage you, let us know what it is that you need. If this pole puller, these pole pullers that we presented isn't something that you're looking for, or you need something a little bit different, or you have a better idea, we would love to hear from you. One thing's for certain is we're not going to make it carryable. There's nothing big enough or small. There's nothing powerful enough to pull the poles out of the ground that's going to be light enough not to cause injuries, at least not in the year 2021. Maybe some future generation might have a lighter, stronger material or product, but not now. So anyhow, open up the floor to any questions at this point. If you have questions, comments, maybe we have someone on the call that's used these before and you'd like to share your experience, you're welcome to do so at this time. Any questions, comments?
So Noah, this is Rick Kennerly. As always, I got questions and comments.
Love to hear from you, Rick.
No problem. OSHA actually has a rule in place now, which is 1926.950, that utility cannot pull a pole with a digger derrick. So there's a hefty fine associated with that if OSHA finds someone doing like what you saw in the or what you showed us in the video there. So you may want to mention that. Secondly, I'd like a copy of the presentation if I can get it from Samantha or yourself would be great. Third, here in Florida, there's a lot of standing water around poles and the ground's very soft. So my question is there a pad that goes with this at request if the base of the HD 60 or whatnot starts sinking into the mud as it's pulling the pole?
Okay, thank you for the very first one that you put out there. In return, I'm gonna ask you to email me that that OSHA rule. That is
Sure.
very, very good information. Number two, yes, Samantha will get that sent out to you today, this morning, very quickly, so you can have that. And then number three, currently, no, there is not another pad, but again, that is a nice addition to it. And as I was doing the presentation today for the second time, I got to thinking, why are we not providing that pad between the heads to keep it from beating against each other? In fact, now that I just said that, I remember hearing Dave Peckenbush's voice tell me that that's something that we need to do. And so that's something that I'm going to look into doing that. But Rick, I'm guessing that this pad would be somewhat the shape of the pole puller now on the base, but just a little bit wider to get more ground force. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, like 2 semicircle halves or something of the sort, you know, where it would accommodate the largest diameter pole in the center and then extend out, you know, whatever dimension it needed to be. And you could also use the pad for both applications. You can use it to separate the heads during transport and then use it for setting up the, you know, the pole when you have those type of conditions. The third question I have is, here in Florida, we have a lot of concrete poles, kip poles primarily, and utilities are always after ways of doing this rather than renting cranes, which is very expensive. It's about another $5,000 a day for crane rental to pull these poles when they have to do right-of-ways or change-outs or whatnot on them. So I guess my question is, do we have an adapter for the concrete pole head specifically, or would you have to cut it with a saw and then pull it like you showed that last demonstration there with the wooden pole?
Well, I never heard the last part of that one where you cut it and then use it that way. Never even thought about that. Is that possible? Sure. But at this point, we haven't done anything with concrete poles or steel poles as well. We thought we had a breakthrough in the concrete pole side where there was a guy actually out of Florida. I can't remember who he worked for, but it was electric utility or electric utility contractor. And he knew somebody that had a manufacturing facility for concrete poles. And we were going to work together, and he was going to see about getting us concrete poles to be able to test and all that good stuff. But then that ended up falling through. I couldn't ever reach him again. I called him several times. Perhaps I can find his information since you're in the state of Florida. Maybe if he might be close to you, maybe you can go and find him and work that out with him. But that is something that that we would like to do at some point. We just haven't done it as of yet.
Okay, thank you.
For those that don't know, Rick Kennerly is our manufacturer's representative in the state of Florida, and we're excited to have him on. I was explaining to him that there's never been so much activity, I think, from a rep agency in such a short time that he's been on. And what makes him very helpful and valuable to the LineWise brand is he's also an engineer. And so that makes a big difference. He brought some good information to the table about the buddy bushing in the last presentation that we did. And now he's done this on the pole puller. And so these OSHA rules OSHA rule that he mentioned and this idea that he's presented today about the pad, very, very good information on how it can be used for both the ground stabilization and be used for the heads as well. So Rick, again, thank you very much. Continue to bring this kind of information to us. It's going to help us all be successful. And so if you're a manufacturer's rep and you're on the call today, thank you for joining. Thank you for being a part of the LineWise team. Be looking for opportunities to make the LineWise brand better. We want to hear from you. Be communicating with Dave and myself on any kind of things that you can find that will help us sell the product. Also, if you're a customer and you're on the call today, thank you for joining. Feel free to contact us with any questions, or your local manufacturer's rep agency, which can be found on our website at line-wise.com. Any other questions before we end the call today? Any other comments? If not, then thank you. Next webinar will be in 3 weeks. We will be working on getting out to the shop floor to be able to show you a product that we have built out there, which is going to be the LL6 4500, and basically the single line pick application is what we are going to be sharing with you. So basically a product that's going to lift a single phase, whether it be bundled or single conductor. So again, thank you again for joining us today. Remember, work smarter, not harder. Use LineWise products to get the job done, keeping you moving down the line. And so we look forward to seeing you again in the next 3 weeks. Take care.